everyone. I'm Jana Rieger, host of Enjoy the Life You're Living podcast. And today I'm thrilled to introduce our guest, Dr. Brendan Coates. Brendan has a background in, I guess we'd call it functional medicine, Brendan, and but really wide-ranging in terms of where your journey has gone to. And you've now come to this point of being very interested in longevity. And so welcome to the podcast, Brendan. Really nice to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me. Yeah,
You're
it's
welcome.
it's it's become a wide disbursement of enthusiastic pursuits. Let's just say that.
That's awesome. Well, I'd love to, if you could take us on a bit of a journey from
Sure.
where you started in functional medicine and you now have this longevity summit that you're putting on. So, how did life take you from one place to where you are right now?
Right. Thank you. You're Canadian, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll give you the Coles notes. When I'm
Okay.
speaking with Americans, I usually refer to the Cliffs notes.
Excellent.
I used to be in the entertainment industry, in the bar industry, and very condensed version of this story. A woman came up to me because I was in quite good shape.
Yeah.
Continue to really strive towards that. She came up to me and she asked me, how can she lose weight?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, wow, I didn't really expect that. So sure. So we sat down for about 10, 15 minutes and I shared with her all of the strategies that I thought would be pertinent to her. So intermittent fasting, time restricted eating, how to strategically do intermittent fasting with some cardio in the morning, some nutritional strategies, how to
Mm.
exercise, just some basic fundamental concepts about lifestyle, nutrition, and exercise. And afterwards, she got up, gave me a big hug, and she gave me $100 bill. She pulled it out from her pocket and she said,
Mm.
"Thank you. You just saved my life." And
Mm.
I was like, okay, that light just turned on. I want to do this. I want to
Mm.
start helping people. And it was roughly around the same time when I'd recently moved back from the Caribbean and I just got hit with a ton of bricks with allergies. And so I
Mm.
sought out my mentor, Dr. Nander Bajuz, and he said, Coatsers, you've got a leaky gut. And I said,
Mm.
what does my gut have anything to do with my allergies? And he just
Mm.
kind of, patted me on my back. He's like, there. Let me entertain you and educate you. Right. So I went to his clinic. We did a 3 hour session of a full intake of, he was just teaching me everything. And then he put me on a protocol
Mm.
where I completely rehabilitated my gut, healed and sealed my gut. Within 7 days of the protocol, my allergies completely disappeared. And he
Mm.
didn't even hint about my allergies. He focused
Mm.
on the gut. And then he said, the next conversation is like, see, your allergies went away. Who would have
Mm.
thought? And it was just so amazing. And so, right then and there, that completely changed my perspective on medicine. I said,
Mm.
why don't doctors teach this? Why
Mm.
doesn't anyone know about this leaky gut and nutrition?
Mm.
And so I decided to not only scream that at the top of the mountaintops, at the same time when that woman asked me to help her with her health, he said, Coatsers, it would be wise for you to go to school and pursue nutrition, functional medicine, and my ongoing teachings, along with many other teachers that I can introduce you to.
Mm.
And so that led into a lifelong pursuit of continuing education, getting multiple degrees and my doctorates. And now here I am helping people all around the world healing and sealing their guts. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, that's exciting. So when the woman came up to you in the bar,
Mhm.
how had you, and you're in shape, phenomenal shape at that time,
Yeah.
and still,
Thank you.
so how did you learn how to live in a healthy manner that
I
you had enough knowledge to share it with her?
I was always in good shape. I
Mm.
come from a very athletic background. I played hockey, baseball.
Mm.
I loved working out. I remember when I was 16 or 15 asking to get a gym membership, and I would walk during lunch in high school to the
Mm.
gym, get in a quick 45-minute workout and go back to class. And that was my so much passion in between hockey and baseball. And I fell in love with working out so much that I just became obsessed with them. I grew up watching multiple aunts on stage in different types of bodybuilding competitions. My aunt won Miss Fitness Canada back
Mm,
in the day. So I was very influenced in that capacity. And so with the sports background, I was able to instill those teachings very, very basic to pretty much anyone, and anyone
mm,
that didn't come with a background like that. It would be golden advice. So the strategy as a up and coming practitioner or a coach, if you will, you just got to find someone that has a lesser degree of understanding with nutrition and health than you do, and you'll be teaching them wise information. So that was my strategy for quite some time until I really built up a solid foundation of information.
mm. And so interesting you use the term leaky gut with this. I'm sorry, I forget the name of the physician who helped you.
Oh, Dr. Nandor, that's okay.
Okay. Dr. Nander, he helped you with this leaky gut. Um, Probably a lot of people have heard that term. I know I
Right.
have.
Mhm.
I have an idea in my head what it is, but I'm sure it's completely wrong. So I would love if you could um, tell us a bit more about exactly what is that, and
Sure.
then what was the rehab, or what is the rehab for
Yeah.
that?
Okay. He wrote his master's thesis on leaky gut, I believe, almost 35 years ago now.
Okay.
Not a lot of people knew what leaky gut was 35 years ago.
Yeah.
And to my recollection, the title was "Leaky Gut um, is the basis for all chronic disease, or is the root of all
Hmm.
chronic disease."
Hmm.
And I remember this story because he continued to tell it to me. He said in one section he was discussing lectins, lectins, and if your listenership and viewership are familiar with Dr. Gundry's work, they'll know what lectins are. And he said the prof put a big X in that whole section, and he said, not backed by science. Huh. Well, now we can definitely say that that information is backed by science. It
Hmm.
just took a little while. And so Dr. Nandor, among with his teachers, were really at the forefront and at the the renegade phase of leaky gut, if you will, in modern day medicine.
Hmm.
So leaky gut it's also known as hyperpermeability of the intestines. And
Hmm.
basically, when I discuss or when we use the word gut, a lot of people think that that's their stomach. Well, it's not entirely just the stomach. It is from their mouth all the way to their rectum. It's the
Hmm.
whole GI. That's the gut. The gut has basically a unilateral function. One, it's to prevent pathogens, bacteria, viruses, food additives, environmental toxins, things from essentially going into the bloodstream and the body that don't belong. So that's one.
Hmm.
It protects. It's a protective barrier. And then the second component basically allows the acceptable nutrients and fuel and micronutrients to come into our body for utilization.
Hmm.
The problem of the matter is most people, 99% of the general population, are walking around with degrees of compromised gut, compromised digestion, compromised leaky gut. And so
Hmm.
what's happening, these undigested proteins and foods and environmental toxins and bacteria and viruses, they're essentially invading into the systemic bloodstream via the gut.
Hmm.
And so that protective border has been compromised. And so
Hmm.
what happens is over time, these compounds that don't belong, they're continuously causing an immune response,
Hmm.
tiring the system out, making our body unable to, in my case, combat the pollutants and the allergens that I was exposed to in the springtime. And so the result
Hmm.
was histamine response, watery eyes, runny nose, and all that stuff. But if I had a strong integral gut and my
Hmm.
immune system wasn't being exhausted by the continuous damage of the gut, then I'd
Hmm.
be able to really tolerate and combat those allergens coming into my body. But I
Hmm.
couldn't. And so my symptoms, my allergies were beautiful feedback letting me know that my gut was in fact impaired.
Hmm.
But I was pretty much silencing those symptoms with Allegra and
Hmm. Yeah.
Reactin and all of those things, like most people do. They don't correlate their body's symptoms to their gut. Only 20% of individuals who have sort of gut related symptoms can consciously make a connection that their food is linked to their gut, or
Mm.
the symptoms are, they've got heartburn or gas or bloating. They're like, okay, I've got a gut issue. But all of those other symptoms, people with rheumatoid arthritis or autoimmune conditions or head issues, brain issues, skin issues, joint issues, they don't correlate that to the gut. But
Mm.
in actuality, it absolutely is. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So two questions come from this. What makes people have a leaky gut? So what predisposes us or creates that in us? And then
Mhm.
what are you doing in your clinical practice to combat that or help people through it?
Sure. Good, great questions. What causes the leaky gut, or what were you asking?
Yeah, what are we doing as human beings that sets
Yeah,
us up for this? Are we
sure.
just born with it or do we ingest stuff
You
that
know,
creates
that's a
it?
great that's a great question. We are all actually born with leaky gut on purpose.
Oh.
The intestines are not yet formed um, to the degree where they are now as an adult, simply because mom's colostrum, all of those nutrients are meant to go into the systemic bloodstream, into the immune system to develop the immune system, right? So in
Mm,
colostrum, we've got all of the immunobodies and immunoglobulins that are ultimately creating the immune system.
mm,
And so, yes, we are all born with leaky gut on purpose,
mm,
which now is a very, very valid point. And I haven't really discussed this in a very long time. What are most babies exposed to or given a little bit prematurely? Formula. And
mm,
what's formula made from? Well, dairy or other forms of ingredients that are sometimes synthetic, sometimes are definitely foreign to the baby. So hold on, let me think for a second. You mean to tell me that a baby's got leaky gut on purpose upon birth? Babies are often being fed formula, infant formula, prematurely. And
mm,
so now all of these compounds are invading into the bloodstream, not strengthening the immune system, but weakening the immune
mm,
system.
mm.
And so a lot of children are being born behind an eight wall. And this is not meant to offend or piss off any mothers that are feeding their babies formula. Let's
Yeah.
just be honest with ourselves. Baby born with leaky gut. So there's some challenges that we are faced with in today's sort of lifestyle, and often
Mm,
what hospitals are prescribing and suggesting to early families as well. So that's first. But let's just say the baby is breastfed for quite some time and the gut is healed. Well, what are also children fed prematurely? Arrowroot crackers,
mm,
right? Gluten. And we
mm,
know that gluten seriously damages the gut. And so it's modern day nutrition
mm,
or not nutrition that's really setting us back in terms of our own health, right?
mm.
Things that don't belong that we're consuming all damage the gut. Let's just say hypothetically, baby is breastfed, baby is not consuming any gluten,
Yeah.
baby is not consuming any foods that don't belong all the way until, let's say, they're 20 years old. So
Yeah.
you've got a robust 20-year-old.
Yeah.
Okay, well, sometimes in most cases, individuals are drinking excessive waters or fluids with their meals.
Mm,
Maybe they're drinking carbonated beverages.
mm,
In many cases, in the Western diet, people are consuming too many carbohydrates.
mm.
And carbohydrates usually taste pretty darn good,
Yeah.
right? So people are just like chew, chew, swallow because it tastes so good.
Yeah.
And when you are not chewing your food properly, if you're mouth breathing, if you're watering down your meals with excessive fluids, if you're drinking carbonated beverages, all of those are a recipe for essentially extinguishing and watering down the stomach acid in your stomach.
Uh,
The stomach is meant to be acidic all the time. I once thought that the stomach was pH neutral until the stomach sensed food, but no, the stomach is always acidic. So that's one of the problems with a lot of people. They're guzzling down overly pH alkaline water, thinking
mm,
that they're alkalizing their body. Well, it's great, but excessive amounts of pH alkaline water is going to water down and extinguish the stomach acid.
mm,
So that's another thing. And then what happens is if you are watering down the acidity in your stomach, that stomach acid can't signal to the pancreas to release those digestive enzymes.
mm,
And when those digestive enzymes aren't being stimulated and released, now you've got these food molecules going into the duodenum, essentially undigested, and even somewhat acidic, but not acidic enough. So
Mm,
interestingly enough, the stomach acid can't signal to the pancreas to also release something called bicarbonate. And
mm,
bicarbonate goes down in the pancreatic duct into the duodenum to neutralize the acidity. So it's a two-parter. What
mm,
happens is you've got not enough acidity being watered down, but there's still enough acidity to aggravate the small intestine. And so that usually results in you've got undigested foods in the small intestine. You've got some acidity from the stomach that wasn't neutralized by the bicarbonate. And now that acidity is causing little micro tears into the intestine, as well as the undigested foods that are causing little micro tears. And then we've got food additives, colorings,
mm,
food artificial sweeteners. We've got, again, environmental toxins, all of
mm,
these things that don't belong or they should have been essentially zapped by the stomach acid initially. Now you've
mm,
got these invaders essentially penetrating into the body via the
mm,
hyperpermeable gut,
mm,
causing an immune response.
mm.
So as that continues to happen, it's going to continue to exhaust the body and it's going to continue to exhaust the immune system, causing an ongoing immune response. And so the immune system can only do so much for so long until it's like, I've had enough. I
Wow.
can't keep on playing damage control. And
Yeah.
so what happens is the body sort of loses it's something called oral tolerance, and the immune system essentially starts to almost collapse, or it starts to attack its own tissue through collateral damage. And now you've got an immune or an autoimmune condition. All of that because most people aren't chewing the foods properly.
Wow. That's amazing. And that's really interesting, something I hadn't heard before. And you mentioned as well that the title of Dr. Nader's master's, which was
Leaky gut,
related to
the underlying catalyst to chronic disease, basically. I think that's what it was.
right,
Yeah.
right. So on the topic of chronic disease, I'd also I know that you have a background beyond just the gut, and that you've spent time training with Dr. John DeMartini in human
Mhm.
behavior.
That's right.
And there seems to be this relationship between not only the physical stuff that we take in and how it affects our immune system, but also potentially our behavior, what we're thinking, and how that may also be influencing our immune system. So I would love for you to talk a little bit about how that training with Dr. DeMartini has
Mhm.
influenced your approach to wellness and longevity.
Yeah, that's a great question. It certainly has shaken up my original belief and perspective towards the gut. I used to think that it all started with the gut.
Mm,
And to a large truth, it is a true statement. However, when you understand the autonomic nervous system and when you take into consideration someone's perspectives and how they perceive their external environment, then we realize that their perspectives, their perceptions on events ultimately pull the strings or push the levers on their autonomic nervous system.
mm,
And how someone responds to various stresses will either put them into a more parasympathetic state or a more sympathetic state, which usually is the latter, the sympathetic state.
yeah.
So most people are walking around stressed. Most people are walking around with resentment, sadness, anxiety, depression towards some sort of unrealistic expectation of how life should be or
Yeah.
how someone should have done something.
Right.
Whatever the case may be, the degree of their misinterpretation or the degree of their imbalanced ratio of how they're perceiving that event or that person will beautifully dictate and demonstrate their symptomatology.
Yeah.
So symptoms can be quite mild, and usually that's a reflection of maybe a little bit of a mild imbalance towards someone or something. But if someone's got a real rigid belief structure or a rigid experience towards something that happened in the past or something like that, then the rigidity will demonstrate and display rigid forms of physical symptomatology. And so that's just applied physiology. Not a lot of schools teach that. Not a lot of
Mm,
doctors understand it. But when I
mm,
realized that our perceptions absolutely govern our body's autonomics and our
mm,
autonomics govern our body's physiology,
mm.
and it was like, oh my God, I've got to go almost back to school all over again. But it's a beautiful complement to understanding the digestive process because
Mm,
when someone's stressed, guess what's not happening? Resting and digesting,
mhm, mhm,
right?
mhm,
All of the
mhm,
nutrients that are once just dispersed into the GI tract for digestion.
mhm.
If someone's in a state of fight and flight, the body and the brain can't conceptualize what that stressor is, right?
Yeah.
When we were in our primitive cultures of hunter gatherers and there was a stress or an event that perceived would
Mhm,
be life threatening,
mm,
let's just say it was, we can say a tiger or a bear.
mhm.
Our modern tiger or bear is someone or something on the computer
Yeah.
or a relationship with a spouse or a kid that's flunking in school or someone that's cut us off or even just doom scrolling on on the cell phone.
Yeah.
Those stressors to the degree of someone's perception is the same degree as someone running away from a bear in our most
Mm,
primitive ways.
yeah.
And so the body and the brain can't decipher that. And so if that's the stress, then all of the blood and all of the glucose and energy is being distributed to the muscles so we
Mm,
can fight and flee. So if most people are walking around stressed, like most of us are, unless they are able to do some personal development work,
mm,
then all of their potential energy is being distributed into their muscles and their extremities, not going to digestion, not going into that parasympathetic state. And so
yeah.
that's where it beautifully complements your work and understanding and application for breath, because breath is the most rudimentary form of practice to help get someone into a state of parasympathetic relaxation and resting and digesting. So it's really, really beautiful. It's incredible to understand, but it's kind of complex, but at the same time, it's kind of quite simple if you think about it.
Yeah, for sure. It really is at the core of integrative medicine and bringing all these things together
Mhm.
in an approach that's blending all of them for the betterment. So, do you find, has your practice changed when you're working with people who are coming to you for nutritional advice?
Yeah, it originally it was very basic, right?
Yeah.
My flagship program is a 6 week gut reset program, and it's dominated by physiology, supplementation, using the body's natural chemicals to induce and stimulate digestion and help the immune system and help with neurotransmitters and so forth. Very, very, I'm going to say rudimentary in a way, but for most people, they still wouldn't understand it. But it's very basic and it garnishes a tremendous amount of results. But when I started to understand the autonomics, when I started to further delve into psychology and
Mm,
human behavior and the study of axiology and the study of teleology and epistemology, all of these things, I was like, oh my God, I'm really leaving things on the table and I'm not doing my
mm,
clients a service because I have to tie in human behavior. So what I did was when I got my doctorate's degree, I did a big sort of Zoom surprise announcement and I showed everyone my last degree, but I also had Dr. John on the call and it was a nice surprise for him too. But then we did an interview and I recorded that interview
mm,
because he was discussing epigenetics and he was
mm,
discussing how behaviors influence the digestive process. And it was one
mhm,
of the last things that I didn't quite include in my program. So I called it setting the stage for healing. And it
mm,
was all about mindset. And it was
mm,
all about integrating how someone's perceptions ultimately dictates the autonomics. And
mm,
if basically, if someone's walking around and they've got resent towards someone or something or an event, they will never bring about a state of healing because they're
mm,
continuously in that state of stress and they're
mhm,
not able to balance their autonomics because they've either consciously suppressed or unconsciously repressed whatever it is that event, and it
mhm,
will not bring about healing because it's still residing in their subconscious space. So
mhm,
until you're able to bring up that event, whatever that event is, neutralize it by finding sort of the hidden order towards it, then it
Hmm.
no longer occupies space and time in our psyche and our mind.
Yeah.
And then therefore someone can now move forward into a state of healing.
Yeah.
So it has beautifully complemented my efforts and my practice because now I tie in so much more human behavior. But I also reserve that for a few weeks in because I don't want it to be too overwhelming for a new client and scare them off and be like, who the heck does it? Like, I did not sign up for this.
That was actually my next question for you was as human beings, especially in the West, I
Yeah.
think maybe I'm overgeneralizing, but we want the quick pill. We want like tell me what to eat, tell me what not to eat,
Yeah.
and even like what supplement can I take just to make this better? So my question to you was going to be like what kind of resistance? Because when we go over to that autonomic side, it kind of
Mm,
gets into the psychology and it gets
sure.
into these other things that we have to take a bit of effort to do.
Yep.
Um, what have you found in terms of people's openness to accepting that as part of their healing?
Yeah. It's a great question. It is a little woo woo, right? That
Sure.
space. So I have a hard time presenting these concepts on social media, and I have a hard time presenting them on enrollment calls or even sales calls because you said it. People, they just want to be directed. They
Yeah.
just want to be told what to do, what to buy, what supplement to take, what medication to take, because they've been conditioned. They have been nurtured and natured into the victim mentality that it's not their fault. Well,
Mhm.
I'm here to tell you and push you, and not just you, doctor,
Yes.
but your viewership and your listenership, that until you hold yourself accountable, you're
Mm.
going to continuously nurture this victim of history mentality.
Hmm.
And that's a tough pill to swallow, pardon the pun. So
Hmm.
it's hard to initially when I'm working with clients, yeah, you got to baby them and, you know, hold their hand a little bit. But once they know who I am and once they realize that I wear my heart on my sleeve and it's coming from absolute unconditional care and love and I want to help them,
Mm.
then then you sort of open up the opportunity to hold them accountable and show them the other way. I've got
Hmm.
one woman that I'm working with right now. She is very, very steadfast with her political opinion towards all of these events that are happening right now.
Mm.
And these types of individuals, they're also very, very rigid with their health
Mm.
or lack thereof. And so it's difficult to say, hey, all of the TV and the news that you've been consuming over the last decades and all of the hatred that you have towards one political party, do you think that there's a correlation to the symptoms that your body is demonstrating? That hatred and then all of that energy that you're giving to someone else is now actually draining your body and exhausting your immune system and is actually
Mm.
robbing your own health? And
Hmm.
so the degree of hatred and energy that you're giving towards that political party is the actual feedback showing you the degree of your sickness. And
Mm.
that sickness is trying to discuss or present to your higher self and your intuition, saying, hey, stop giving the politicians all of your energy because I'm
Mm.
going to continue to get sick. And so
Mm.
this sickness is trying to give you feedback. But most people, again, it's applied physiology. Most people are just completely blind to their
Mm.
symptoms. So they label their symptoms as the problem, but in actuality, the symptom is the solution. Temporal
Yeah.
in a higher consciousness form, the body is beautifully demonstrating feedback to trying to get you back into
Yeah.
alignment.
Yeah. Give you that tap on the shoulder.
Yeah.
Um, as you know, I love breath work. It's
Mhm.
at the core of who I am and what I do.
Right.
So I'd love to hear your take on how you use it in terms of digestive health and explaining that to folks.
It's one of the first lessons that I teach when I'm trying to advise strategies on how to improve their digestion.
Mm.
I'm going to refer back to a publication that was printed in 1833. The doctor was Dr. William Beaumont.
Mm.
He um, essentially rescued, I can't, is it Saint? Denis or Saint Alexis. I can't remember the boy's name. He was cleaning his musket from after a hunting trip,
Mm,
and it shot his whole abdomen off, like the whole
mm,
thing.
mm,
And everyone was like, okay, this boy's going to die. There's no hope in hell he's going to live. And
mm,
Dr. Beaumont was there. He was a field surgeon for the war, and he bandaged him up and he was able to keep him alive
mm,
despite all odds. And so that 24 hours turned into 48 hours, 72 hours of him surviving. And then it turned into a year and a half of him surviving. But
mm,
his stomach never healed. And there was essentially a hole from his abdomen going into his stomach that never healed. And so Dr. Beaumont would proceed to explore and experiment on his subject for about a year, looking and
mm,
observing how digestion worked. He
mm.
would he would tie food to string and put it in his stomach to see how stomach acid worked and all that stuff. What do you think the number one thing was that completely halted digestion when he observed his subject?
Halted digestion.
Yeah, just
So
halted it, stopped it in its tracks.
I would say it would be something related to fear.
Yeah, you got it. It was actually, in his words, rage.
Rage. Oh.
When his subject was in a state of rage or anger, fear even, it completely halted digestion. Stomach acid stopped being secreted and was being produced. In fact, interestingly enough, it's very rare that you're going to see publications on this because they don't do human studies on digestion in real
Yes.
time. They're
Yeah.
not going to open someone up. So this was a real miracle that happened at the time. He found that in the state of rage and anger, that bile would travel all the way up the common bile duct into the duodenum, into the stomach, even,
Mm,
and which even suppressed digestion even further.
mm,
So, where am I getting at with this? Well, when someone is angry or full of rage or sadness or anxious or depressed, are they breathing slowly? And are they breathing in and out of their nose with
no.
nice, long, deep boxed breaths? No, of course not. They're huffing and puffing and they've got rage in their mouth breathing. So, is there a correlation with the mouth breathing and the huffing and puffing, which suppresses the stomach acid, or is it being in a state of sympathetic dominance? All of these factors we need to consider, but of course, look at breath, right? So, when I work with my clients, it's wise to just sit down, calm your nerves,
Yeah.
do some box breathing before you sit down and eat. Just start to regulate your parasympathetic nervous system,
Mm,
and that puts you in
mm.
a state that can now accommodate the act of digesting food. So
Yeah.
it's how rudimentary, right? Who knew?
Very much so. And again, part of my clinical background was around swallowing disorders. And
Mm,
um, when students are taught about this, not often do are they really taught about the integration of breathing and swallowing,
right.
except for in a very physiological sense, right? You don't want to swallow when you're breathing in because you'll get something in your lungs. But
Sure.
there's more and more evidence now that is looking at the relationship of these two things for swallowing disorders that are anxiety related, and not necessarily physiologically related. So I have never heard the story that you shared, Brendan, and that's fascinating. And I really love it. Thank you for sharing that.
It's schools don't teach it. I was doing some deep research because I was trying to find the origins of who was one of the originating sort of doctors or fathers that created this stomach acid protocol. It's
Mm,
what I practice. It's the lost art of gastro reacidification. And there's not a lot there. Like there's one book, it's here somewhere, Why Stomach Acid is Good for You. Pretty much
mm,
everyone's read that if they're into stomach acid or if they're into functional medicine, but there's not a lot of reference before that. And so
mm.
I stumbled across Beaumont's story, and I will continue to use that as a reference because that's the starting point, essentially. Like that's where it all started.
Yeah, fantastic. So, a bit of a goofy question for you. Is
Sure.
coffee good for you?
Now, you know what? Thank you for asking that. I originally thought that if you look at a chemical reaction and what coffee does with adenosine and our neurotransmitters and norepinephrine and cortisol, and the HPA axis on how essentially caffeine induces that stress response. And it does. Coffee also naturally increases blood sugar, even without cream
Mm,
or sugar. It naturally increases blood sugar.
mm,
So I was always on the stance, no, don't drink coffee
mm.
with your meals, and especially don't drink coffee after your meals, because what do most people do when they're at a restaurant after they've consumed their
Yeah,
dinner and dessert?
yeah.
They're served coffee. And I'm still on the side that it's not wise to have coffee after a meal, because in theory it halts digestion.
Mm,
But again, going back to Beaumont's studies with his subject, he observed many, 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 many meals that his subject would have coffee with his breakfast. And this guy was eating like a king. So he was um, essentially living off of the land by chopping wood,
yeah,
gardening, doing all the things in the 1830s that a house maid would technically do, but in the male version.
yeah.
But he was eating great food like pork and beans and beef stew and all sorts of different root vegetables, delicious food. And he quite often would have coffee with every meal. And he observed that digestion was not really impeded or affected
Hmm,
when he consumed coffee. And in fact, many, many times, the food was completely digested within 2 to 3 hours.
mm.
And I used to think that coffee halts digestion.
Yeah.
So I've come to the conclusion that coffee, a little bit with a meal, not necessarily a bad idea if you are healthy,
Mm,
right?
mm.
However, coffee after a meal, probably not a fan of. And he was probably drinking a small little mug,
Right.
right?
Not like our super huge coffees that in North
No,
America we tend to consume.
right.
Yeah,
So there's some, some nuances that we need to take into consideration and some factors to consider.
yeah.
But I'm still going to advise your listenership and your viewership, still probably a wise idea to stay away from coffee with your meals.
Okay, got it. So to wrap up here, there's one question that I ask all of my guests, and
Okay.
that is, what does the phrase enjoy the life you're living mean to you?
Oh, I'm going to quote Napoleon Hill. His word is chief aim,
Mm,
or I'm going to refer some ancient philosophers, Aristotle, with
mm,
your telos, which is the study of
mm,
teleology. And the study of teleology is the understanding of end in mind, right?
mm,
We all live in accordance to our own set of values, to our own telos, as Napoleon Hill would say, our own chief aim.
mm,
And ultimately, it means to live a life on purpose.
mm,
Be absolutely undeniably authentic to yourself, and whatever it is that's inspiring to yourself, go do that.
mm, mm,
Oftentimes, we are comparing ourselves and our lives to how we think it should be based on someone else's life, but that person has their own set of values, has their own set of events that they've been through and epigenetic tags.
yeah,
So it's really futile to compare your life to someone else because they've got their own set of values and events.
yeah.
And so to answer your question is to honor your highest values. And I am so blessed that I identified ultimately some of my voids, and my voids have turned into my values. One of my voids was I didn't want to be stupid. I didn't want
Mm,
to be not smart. I had a very tough time reading when I was a kid, and I did not have good grades, and that turned into the pursuit of wanting to be smart.
mm,
So
mm,
it's being able to identify what was maybe a void, something that you perceive to be missing, is
mhm,
ultimately your greatest gift. And if you're
mm,
able to identify that and then go pursue that, that can
mm.
turn into a lifelong, fulfilling life with lots and lots and lots of enthusiasm and pleasure towards pursuing those things that are inspiring. So
Yeah.
identify that and go pursue that.
Nice. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Coates, for this really great discussion. I loved it. And thank you for everything that you're doing in terms of healing people. And I'm really glad that that woman came up to you in the bar and
Yeah.
asked for your advice. That was something that has changed the world for the better, as you're changing people and helping them. So thank you very much.
I wish I could I wish I could find her. Maybe she's listening to this podcast and she's like, that was me. That was me. So maybe I'll meet her and give her a big hug, and maybe I'll give her a $100 bill back plus some
Yeah.
interest.
Yeah, certainly. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.